And if you're a knitter, you realize why that was a horrible, horrible mistake. Because knitting with black yarn, you can't see. And then when you're knitting teeny fingers and you make a mistake and you have to pull them back, you have to find that teeny tiny black yarn. So that was the worst thing, the hardest thing I've ever knit.
Hey, this is Jeff from With Jeff, and it's been a whirlwind couple of weeks. You see, I was going out to do some photographs and get some nice images and a few things right after the last show. And I happened upon the process of becoming a drone pilot. So now I've been droning around, taking some photos, not droning on, but droning around, taking some drone photos and videos and learning how to do that. And I also accomplished the feat, if you want to call it that, of getting my Part 107 FAA license to fly a drone commercially. So that's why you haven't seen me around for a couple weeks, because I've been out there shooting photos. Which brings me to one of my rants, and that's that I hate the New England Patriots. Not because they're a successful team, not because they have one of the best quarterbacks around, not because they have one of the best coaches around, but because their infrastructure doesn't allow for creativity. When I was down there today, they said to me that the limit for a camera lens to be brought into the stadium, and I'm going to a game coming up, the length limit for a lens to be brought into the stadium is this big. You probably don't care about that. It's the width of an ID, or length of an ID, or length of a credit card. And that pretty much means, let me see what I'm shooting with now. That pretty much means that you can only bring like a 50 millimeter lens or a 40 or just a fixed short lens that doesn't do much. And especially if you're up in the nosebleed seats, you're not going to get a good shot of the field. So that's their first thing in short-sightedness. And I understand that it might be done for safety. The other thing is that I was down there today with the drone. The team's away. The team's in Mexico. I was down there with the drone and I went to the security office, which everyone should do. But I checked all my FAA regulations, checked all my listings, made sure I wasn't near an airfield or an airport or anything. And I was going to put the drone up in the sky and just take a picture from outside the stadium. Put it up 150 feet or maybe a little higher and take a picture looking down on the empty stadium. And I thought, well, why don't I check in with security, being the good person that I am. So I went and talked to security about that. That's how I found out about the lens length. And they said, no, it's against FAA. And I said, actually, it's not. I'm cleared to fly here unless you have a specific prohibition against drones on private property. But what I would like to do is have one of you guys go with me. I'm just putting the drone straight up in the air. And they said they wouldn't allow it, even though there's no event going on there, even though there were empty parking lots from which I was going to launch. So it wouldn't be over people, wouldn't be in any of the other challenging situations that drones fall into these days. And so that's why I hate the New England Patriots. Well, maybe not the only reason, but we can go into more of that on a separate show. Let me show you some of the footage I did get, because I went across town and threw the drone up in the air, took some photos of the stadium from far away, and we'll look at those right now. Kind of cool. Nice views from afar. One of the things I wanted to talk about, we're not going to be all drones all the time here, but one of the things I wanted to talk about is now I can use this tool to build my business in the real estate arm, in my creative photography arm, and actually as just a recreational fun thing to do. Even filming with Jeff episodes using the drone. So watch for more of that. Send me comments down below in the notes if you'd like to see more of that, or if there's something you'd like to discuss about drones. All right, next up on the show, we're doing some interviews with Jenn Sheelen, who has her own knitting company. She started knitting, might be a year ago now, but it was something she wanted to chase as her bucket list accomplishments, and she has done so. She's created a wildly popular podcast, and she's now creating everything under the sun having to do with knitting. Hey, this is Jeff Cutler from With Jeff, and sitting next to me is Jenn Sheelen, who went out and started her own company, which is a dream a lot of people have. But her company's a little unique. It has to do with knitting and yarns and really crafty stuff. So let's start right in with Jenn and ask her how she did this, how she actually got this whole bucket list dream rolling along. Jenn?
Hi, I'm Jenn of JennSheelen.com. And it's funny, everybody talks about wanting to turn something they love into their business. And I was talking to my hubby about it, and I'm like, well, I'd love to turn this into something, and he goes, well, why don't you start designing patterns? So knitting patterns are huge in the knitting community. So I was like, oh, maybe I can do that. So I started designing, and it was something I never thought I could do, but then once I started it, I got the bug for it. So I kind of just took off from there and said, okay, I can design patterns and sell them. And when they started selling, it's something that just kind of grew into more.
Now, if someone's watching this right now, we've jumped over pretty much the whole formative stage of the business. How did you even know how to design a pattern? Were you taking clothes apart? Were you looking at patterns that already existed? And then how do you learn all this information about wool?
It's funny. It's very similar to drawing a picture. You kind of have to have an idea in your mind of what you want this finished object to look like. But then the tricky part is making those stitches work in order to do that. And really from reaching out with friends and YouTube and various things, mostly the knitting community, I learned how to look up stitch patterns and then put them together to create a pattern. And really from knitting alone and doing it for so many years, you kind of learn too what goes into a pattern and what you need for a pattern and everything you need to put together in order to make one. So that's kind of what I pulled on to start designing myself. So I've taken on even more with my website. I've taken on dyeing yarn, I've taken on funny t-shirts, bags, all that kind of stuff to really turn my passion into a business.
What resources are out there for people to find out about this stuff other than your podcast? Have you listened to knitting podcasts that existed before, or are there message boards? Are there people out there that can train you in this? And then we talked earlier about dyeing your own wool, dyeing your own yarn, and maybe go into that a little bit. But what resources have you used to educate yourself on this?
The knitting community is actually huge. I don't think people realize quite how big it actually is. There's a huge knitting, I'll call it like the Facebook for knitters. It's a website called Ravelry. And that's where a lot of knitters will gather to. There's chat forums and different various groups and free patterns, pay patterns, you name it. It's on this website. That is like the place to go for knitters. And that's actually how I met a lot of my friends when I moved up here to the Boston area, was through that website. So you can find people local, you can find people all over the country, and to ask questions and share knowledge and things like that. So that's really the main place that knitters gather to chit-chat.
Now, what about coloring your own yarns, or where do you source this stuff? Is it all mail order? Do you have a sheep in the backyard? What do you do?
I wish I had a sheep in the backyard. My husband won't let me. Really, if I could, I'd have a goat and it'd be cashmere. But so for dyeing yarn, it really was a lot of piecing things together. When I was trying to look online, I didn't find the information I normally would for knitting. So it really took a little bit more work on my part for doing a little bit more homework with books and really diving into the internet and a lot of trial and error with dyeing yarn. There's a lot more to it than just taking some powder and putting it in water and putting the yarn in there. There's really, you have to heat it and you have to do certain things to it and you have to set the color. So there are different steps to it. And I really, like I said, it was really just some digging through friends and the internet and different books and various forms of information that way to figure out how to do it.
What's the most difficult article of clothing to create or to knit?
Gloves with fingers. That was the worst thing I ever did. I knit one pair of gloves. I knit them for him and I knit them in black. And if you're a knitter, you realize why that was a horrible, horrible mistake. Because knitting with black yarn, you can't see. And then when you're knitting teeny fingers and you make a mistake and you have to pull them back, you have to find that teeny tiny black yarn. So that was the worst thing, hardest thing I've ever knit, was that simple pair of black gloves.
What's the plan for Jennifer Sheelen moving forward? What avenues do you plan to, leverage to make your business bigger, or where do you want to take this whole project?
I see me growing the podcast more and really growing more on social media. I see me dyeing more yarn. I see me doing kits for that. I see me doing clubs for that, which is a very big deal in the knitting community. Like movie theme yarn, like Harry Potter yarn is a huge deal. Game of Thrones yarn is a huge deal. Things like that, and really growing and expanding the website with more stuff, like more greeting cards and things like that of things I knit, and more knitting fun stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it'll really be just more than patterns and dyed yarn.
How do people get in touch with you? How do they find out more if this is something they're looking to do?
I'm on various forms of social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Tumblr, Ravelry, all as Jenn Sheelen. It's JennSheelen. And that's how I made it the same name across the board to make it really simple to find me.
Pretty smart. Thanks very much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Wasn't that interview with Jenn pretty cool? And the fire pit, of course, is always fun. Just because we try and do that as often as we can. And now that the weather has turned a little raw, we're going to probably do those through the fall. And it's great to toast some marshmallows when it's below freezing outside. And I'm sure you don't disagree. Another update is that I'm not filming this with the green screen behind me and throwing different things up as background because I'm not in the studio. I haven't been over to HCAM for a couple weeks because the format for the show has shortened a little bit, and the shows on Harbor Media tend to be right around 30 minutes. We're trying to make With Jeff around 15 minutes. So you can watch back-to-back shows or watch the segments however you choose. If you're a long-time watcher of the With Jeff show, and by long time I mean 4 months or so, you understand that the show also has a learning segment at the very end. We had a little trouble coming up with the learning segment this week because I wanted to show you how to do tornado poached eggs, which you don't do in an actual tornado, you do it in a pan. And I learned this from my brother Ben, who's a chef. But I don't have the kitchen with me here to do that demonstration. So for the learning segment, what I'm going to do is just share with you another nugget of knowledge, and you can use this however you choose. But today's learning segment on With Jeff is all about how to tie your shoes. Yes, I know, most of you have tied your shoes the same way for decades, for as long as you've been around. But I found something on the internet, if you can believe that, a while back that explained to me if you do the reverse bow when you tie your shoe, it won't come undone. And a lot of people, just because, I don't know, kids are kids, when they do a regular bow to tie their shoe, kids are walking around with shoes undone. So what I wanted to do is show you today that, see if we can get the camera on the shoe. When you do your regular bow, you go over the top and pull through. It's fairly simple to pop the thing out. So if your laces are too long, the bow will come undone. But if you make the bow and go in a reverse bow around it, let me show that to the camera. If you make the bow and go in a reverse around it and then come through, when you pull that tight, it spins the bow and keeps the laces so you don't trip on them, and it's tougher to pull the thing out. So let's show that one more time for you. I know this is gripping TV, but this is the way people usually do it. Over the top. What you want to do is go over the top backwards towards you and then pull it tight. And that will keep the shoe from coming undone, and the bow twists so it's down the length of the shoe itself. And that'll keep your kids from having their shoes come undone, and you as well. So when you go to the gym, it doesn't get caught in a treadmill or something and then pull your whole leg off, or escalators or anything, any of those dire situations. So that's it. That's your learning segment on With Jeff today. If you have ideas for other learning segments, let me know. We have a lot more coming up, but again, because I didn't have the kitchen right here to do it, I couldn't do the kitchen example of the poached eggs or anything else. We may be making some hollandaise sauce. We might be showing you how to make different pies. Lots of stuff. Lots of stuff is coming up. So that's it right now for With Jeff. Thanks for watching. You know how to reach me. I'm online at Jeff Cutler, both Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else, or just go to jeffcutler.com or go to withjeff.com. Thanks again for watching. Hey, this is With Jeff. And if you want to connect with the show, talk to me, leave comments, see past episodes, it's all available online at withjeff.com. You can also go over to youtube.com/harbormedia, and you can spend some more time with me, with Jeff. Thanks.
Another day in the city, and 1 month from the phone. Another week on those side streets, another hour alone. I was a fan.